Welcome to the Midnight Frequency. Tonight, the world is asleep, but you are still awake. I have gathered 3 true stories from the lonely hours of the night shift, followed by 20 minutes of rain to help you drift off. So, lock your doors, turn off the lights, and let the frequency take over. It was October of 2019, and I was working the closing shift at Marco's Pizza in a small town outside of Portland. Most nights were pretty standard. Drunk college kids ordering at 2 a.m., the occasional prank call, nothing I couldn't handle. But there was one delivery that still keeps me up at night. It came in around 11:47 p.m., right before we closed at midnight. The address popped up on the screen, 4782 Hadley Road, and I remember staring at it for a second, because I'd driven past that street 100 times. And I didn't remember any houses that far down. My manager, Steve, he looked at the order and shrugged. Probably one of those old farmhouses. Just drop it and get back. I want to lock up. The order was simple. 1 large pepperoni, no special instructions, paid in cash. I loaded the pizza into the thermal bag, grabbed my keys, and headed out into the October cold. The drive started normal enough. I took the main road out of town, passed the 24-hour gas station, and turned onto Hadley. But the further I drove, the darker it got. The streetlights stopped about 2 miles in, and the road turned from asphalt to gravel. I checked my GPS. It said I was still 5 minutes away. The trees on both sides of the road were thick, almost forming a tunnel, and my headlights barely cut through the fog that was rolling in. I started thinking, who the hell orders pizza out here? Then I saw it. 4782. It was an old 2-story house, set back from the road, with peeling white paint and boarded up windows. The porch light was off. Actually, every light was off. The place looked abandoned. I sat in my car for a moment, engine still running, staring at the house. There was no car in the driveway. No sign of life, nothing. I grabbed my phone and called the number from the order. It rang, and then went to a generic voicemail. Damn it, I muttered. I thought about just leaving, taking the pizza back, but Steve would have docked my pay, and I needed the money. So I grabbed the pizza, stepped out of the car, and walked up to the porch. The wooden steps creaked under my weight, and the air smelled like rotting leaves and something else. Something I couldn't place. I knocked on the door. Nothing. I knocked again, louder this time. Pizza delivery. I called out. Still nothing. I was about to turn around and leave when I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps, coming from inside the house. They were moving toward the door. My heart started pounding, because something about the way those footsteps sounded, it didn't feel right. The door creaked open, just a crack, and I couldn't see anyone. "Hello," I said, holding up the pizza bag. "You ordered a large pepperoni?" The door opened a little wider, and that's when I saw him. A man, maybe in his 50s, standing in the shadows just inside the doorway. He was wearing a stained white undershirt, and his eyes, they were locked on me, not blinking. "That'll be $18.47, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't say anything. He just reached into his pocket, pulled out a crumpled $20 bill, and held it out. I took the money, handed him the pizza, and said, "Keep the change." He nodded, still staring. And then he smiled. Not a normal smile. It was too wide, too forced, like someone who hadn't smiled in years and forgot how. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice raspy and dry. I turned and walked back to my car as fast as I could without running. I got in, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The man was still standing in the doorway, holding the pizza box, watching me. But here's the thing that made my blood run cold. There were no lights on inside the house. Not a single one. He had been standing in complete darkness, waiting. The next day, I told Steve about the delivery, and he looked at me like I was crazy. "Hadley Road?" he said. "There's nothing out there. That whole area's been condemned for years." I pulled up the order on the computer to prove it. But it was gone. No record of the delivery, no phone number, nothing. Steve said the system must have glitched, but I know what I saw. I know where I went. I drove past that house one more time, about a week later, during the day, just to see if it was real. The house was still there, boarded up and abandoned. But when I got out and walked up to the porch, I saw something that made me quit that job the same day. There, sitting on the top step, was an empty pizza box, Marco's Pizza, large pepperoni, and written on the inside of the lid, in thick black marker, were the words, "Come back soon." I never went back to Hadley Road, and I never delivered pizza again, because sometimes the people who order in the middle of the night aren't the people you want to meet. We move from the lonely roads to the bright lights of the highway, where safety is just an illusion. This happened in the summer of 2021, when I was working overnight shifts at a Shell station off Interstate 40. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid $15 an hour, and I needed the money for college. Most nights were dead, the occasional trucker stopping for coffee, maybe a family on a road trip. Nothing unusual. But there was one shift, one night, that made me question everything. It was a Tuesday, around 2:30 in the morning, and I was restocking the cooler when I heard the bell above the door chime. I looked up and saw a man walk in. He was tall, maybe 6'3", wearing a dark hoodie and jeans, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Welcome," I called out, trying to sound friendly. He didn't respond. He just walked straight past the register, past the snack aisle, and headed toward the back of the store. I watched him through the security monitor behind the counter, waiting for him to grab something, anything, but he didn't. He went straight to the bathroom, opened the door, and stepped inside. I heard the lock click. I went back to stocking shelves, thinking he'd be out in a few minutes. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 20. I started getting annoyed because we only had one bathroom, and if another customer came in, I'd have to deal with complaints. I walked to the back of the store and knocked on the door. "Hey, you all right in there?" I called out. No response. I knocked again, louder this time. "Sir, if you need help, just let me know." Still nothing. I pressed my ear against the door, listening, and that's when I realized something. I couldn't hear anything. No water running, no movement, no sound at all. It was completely silent. I stood there for a moment, my hand on the doorknob, debating whether to call my manager or just wait it out. And then I heard footsteps. Behind me, I spun around, expecting to see another customer. But the store was empty. The aisles were clear, the front door was closed, and the parking lot outside was completely still. My heart started pounding. I walked back to the register, checked the security camera feed, and saw nothing. No one had come in. No one had left. Just me and whoever was locked in that bathroom. I grabbed my phone and pulled up my manager's number, ready to call, when I heard it again. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the back of the store, but not from the bathroom, from the storage room. The door was slightly open, and I could see the darkness inside. I never left that door open. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking. No answer. I grabbed the baseball bat we kept under the counter and slowly walked toward the storage room. Every step felt heavier than the last. I reached the door, pushed it open with the bat, and flicked on the light. The room was empty, boxes stacked neatly, cleaning supplies on the shelves, nothing out of place. But then I saw it. On the floor, near the back wall, muddy footprints, fresh ones, leading from the storage room into the main store. I followed the trail with my eyes, and my blood ran cold. The footprints led to the bathroom door. And then they stopped, like whoever made them just vanished. I stood there, frozen, staring at the bathroom door. And that's when I heard the lock click. The door, slowly, creaked open. I gripped the bat tighter, ready to swing, but no one came out. The bathroom was completely empty. The light was off. The sink was dry, and there was no sign anyone had been in there. I checked every corner, every stall. Nothing. But the muddy footprints, they were still there, leading right up to the door. I backed out of the bathroom, my hands shaking, and grabbed my phone. I called my manager and told him I was closing early, that there was an emergency. He tried to argue, but I didn't care. I locked the register, grabbed my keys, and headed for the front door. But before I left, I checked the security footage. I rewound the tape to 2:30 a.m. when the man in the hoodie walked in. And that's when I saw it. On the footage, the man walked into the store. He walked straight to the bathroom. But when I watched closer, frame by frame, he never opened the door. He walked up to it, and then he just disappeared, like he walked through the wall. And then, at 3:15 a.m., right around the time I heard the footsteps from the storage room, the camera glitched, just for a second. And when it came back, there were two figures in the store, me at the front counter, and someone else, standing in the back aisle, facing away from the camera, someone I never saw, someone who was there the entire time, watching me. I quit that job the next morning, didn't even give 2 weeks' notice. I told my manager I was moving, that I got a better offer. Anything to avoid the truth. Because how do you explain to someone that you worked an entire shift with a person who wasn't really there? A few months later, I heard they closed that gas station. The official reason was structural issues. But I talked to one of the guys who worked there after me. He said he quit too. Said he kept hearing footsteps in the storage room, and that the bathroom door would unlock itself in the middle of the night, even when no one was inside. I still drive past that gas station sometimes when I'm on the highway. The lights are off now, the pumps are covered, and the windows are boarded up. But every time I pass it, I swear I see someone standing in the window, wearing a dark hoodie, watching the road, waiting for the next person to work the night shift. And finally, our last tale of the night, proving that sometimes the danger follows you home. This happened to me 3 years ago, in the fall of 2022, when I was living alone for the first time. I had just moved into a small rental house on the outskirts of town. Nothing fancy, 2 bedrooms, a tiny backyard, and an old wooden fence that separated my property from the woods behind it. The landlord warned me the area was quiet, almost too quiet, but I didn't think much of it. I liked the peace, or at least I thought I did. It was a Thursday night, around 10:30 p.m., and I was sitting on the couch watching Netflix, trying to relax after a long day at work. The house was dark, except for the glow of the TV, and I had all the doors locked, all the windows closed. I felt safe. And then I heard it. Whistling. Faint. Distant. Coming from somewhere outside. At first, I thought it was just the wind, or maybe a neighbor walking their dog. But the whistling didn't stop. It was a tune, slow and deliberate, almost like a lullaby. I muted the TV and listened. The sound was coming from my backyard. I stood up, walked to the sliding glass door, and looked outside. The backyard was dark, the motion light hadn't turned on, and I couldn't see anything beyond the fence. But the whistling continued, steady, calm, like someone was pacing back and forth just beyond the tree line. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it through the glass. Nothing. Just the empty yard, the fence, and the darkness of the woods. The whistling stopped. I stood there for a moment, listening to the silence, my heart pounding in my chest. And then I heard it again. But this time, it was closer. It was coming from the side of the house. I walked to the kitchen window, the one that faced the driveway, and peeked through the blinds. The street was empty, no cars, no people, nothing. But the whistling was still there, moving, circling the house. I locked the kitchen door, checked the front door again, and turned on every light I could find. I told myself it was nothing, just some kid messing around, or maybe an animal making weird sounds. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Because the tune, the melody of the whistling, it was too deliberate, too human. I sat back down on the couch, phone in hand, ready to call the police if I heard it again. And for a while, everything was quiet. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I started to relax, thinking maybe whoever it was had left. And that's when I heard it, the whistling, inside the house. It was coming from the hallway that led to my bedroom. My entire body went cold. I stood up, slowly, and looked toward the darkened hallway. The whistling continued, soft and steady, like someone was standing just out of sight, waiting. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, and held it like a weapon. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. The whistling stopped. I waited, every muscle in my body tense, ready to run, and then I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from my bedroom. They moved down the hallway, toward the living room, toward me. I could see the shadow, stretching across the wall, getting closer with each step. I didn't think. I just ran. I bolted for the front door, fumbling with the lock, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the deadbolt. I finally got it open, threw myself outside, and ran to my car. I locked the doors, started the engine, and sat there, staring at my house. The lights were all on, just like I left them. But I could see the front door, still wide open. And then I saw him, a figure standing in the doorway, tall, wearing dark clothes, his face hidden in shadow. He didn't move. He just stood there, watching me. And then he started whistling again, the same tune, slow, deliberate, haunting. I threw the car in reverse, peeled out of the driveway, and drove straight to the police station. The cops went back to the house with me about an hour later. They searched every room, every closet, every corner. They found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no footprints. But when we got to my bedroom, they found something that made my stomach drop. The window, the one that faced the backyard, was unlocked. I know I locked it. I always locked it. One of the officers looked at me and said, "Whoever was here, they probably came in through this window and left the same way." But that didn't explain the whistling, or how they got inside without making a sound, or why they didn't take anything. The police filed a report, told me to get better locks, and said they'd patrol the area more often. But I didn't stay another night in that house. I packed a bag, crashed at a friend's place, and broke my lease the next week. I never went back. A few months later, I was scrolling through a local news article, and I saw something that made my blood run cold. A story about a string of break-ins in the area where I used to live. The police had arrested a man, a drifter, who had been living in the woods behind several rental properties. He would watch people, learn their routines, and break in when they were home. But he never stole anything. He would just stand there in the shadows and wait. The article said witnesses reported hearing whistling before the break-ins, and that the man claimed he wasn't trying to hurt anyone. He just wanted to see how long it would take for them to notice him. I still hear that tune sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet. And every time I do, I check every lock, every window, every door, because I know now that safety is just an illusion. And sometimes the whistling doesn't come from outside. It comes from the places you thought were safe, the places you call home.